Welcome back, friends and patriots. I have the opportunity once again to speak with Andy Hoffman from Miles Franklin, and man, I am absolutely fit to be tied. Andy, how are you?
I'm doing fine. No different, I'm sure.
I'm starting to wonder if maybe the collective outrage of the American people is finally catching up with where you and I have been for so many years, Andy. This overtly criminal system under which we live is now absolutely evident to all. Benghazi, the Fast and Furious, to the IRS targeting Constitutionalists and Tea Party groups, to the Justice Department targeting AP reporters. It's all out there for everyone to see. But the real problem is that the IRS is a quasi-governmental collection arm of the Federal Reserve, and until both organizations are disbanded, I don't think anything will really change.
Right. Well, it's a lot to swallow, but look, the IRS is just the latest. I was on a radio show the other day, and someone started by asking about it. I said, honestly, I haven't spent a great deal of time on it because to me, it's just one of the myriad scandals that I see every single day coming from the powers that be. When I refer to that group, I'm talking about the large corporations as well as the government. Because look, now Bloomberg is being accused of spying on all its customers' data. Michael Bloomberg is now kind of lowering himself to the Warren Buffett type level of sellout. It's everywhere, whether it's corporate America or the government, and the IRS buying its bullets and going after political opposition is nothing new. As far as the collective outrage, I don't even know that people are outraged. I think that they're just numb with how bad things have gotten, and to see the government laughably try to say that consumer confidence rose to the highest level in 6 years after probably the worst month of economic data I can remember just shows you how the extent of their control over the media and the markets has become.
It makes one wonder if this system, which is so absolutely ripe, rotten to the core with criminality and with absolute total 100% corruption, is ready to collapse under its own weight. We've been talking about it for so very long, and I want to talk to you about the G7 emergency meeting that's taking place this weekend and many, many other things. But what's your take on the overall idea that the one way that precious metals can escape from this absolute despotism under which they're confined in the blatant criminality of the cartel's paper games, the only way that they will ever escape that blatant manipulation is when this system collapses under its own weight. There's cracks in the foundation everywhere we look.
Yes, it certainly is. These emergency meetings that we've been seeing now for the past 5 years, they're trying to put, not enough fingers in too many holes in the dike. I mean, to see Greek government bonds go up in price while the Greek economy is at its absolute lowest point ever, shows you just how bad things are. The unemployment rate in Europe just hit its all-time high. The GDP just hit its all-time low. And across the board, you're seeing major political dramas and tensions and record low, ratings for the politicians. Italy, France, Germany, you name it. And of course, here in the States, where if you look at any of the real data as what's going on, it would be hard pressed to say that this is not the worst we've seen since the Great Depression. However, the government I believe they have now changed some of the economic data. They're changing the GDP as of next quarter to add 3% per year. They've clearly changed the employment data to add part-time jobs, minimum wage jobs, double count temporary jobs, all those kind of things. And of course, anytime anything comes out that's better than expected, they're all over precious metals, trying to get the mainstream media to write that gold is down because the economy is good, et cetera, et cetera. So, look, I don't think it's going to be the people that make the system collapse, but as you say, it's going to collapse on itself because, for one, if you're talking about the precious metals world, the physical metal is going to disappear. The mining industry is on the verge of death right now. The cost of production is now below the prices of both metals. And, in the real world, we're talking about a major recession that has shown no signs of abating other than maybe little mini housing bubbles that have been created for the wealthy because of all the free-fed money, which if it stops, if it tapers off for a second, is all gone.
Well, let me ask you this. Let's circle back to the April 12th gold smash when gold was around $1,520. Gene Ahrensberg over at the Got Gold Report wrote a really nice article. I think you've covered this as well, in which he wrote so much for position limits on COMEX gold. He says, where were the regulators on gold futures position limits on April 12th and April 16th? Reports are that 124 tons to 400 tons of gold were sold in an initial sell order. He goes on to outline this, and the takeaway is, when the CFTC is headed by former Goldman Sachs insider Gary Gensler, what chance do we have that honest markets will ever prevail? What's your take on that gold smash that we've seen in the action in the metals? Because I get so tired of people talking about technical analysis. It's such a bunch of BS.
I've been saying for years about how technical analysis is useless in this market. Now I don't even put up charts in my rants showing anything that has to do with them, because it's become so worthless. But as for the 12th and 15th, I don't see it as really much different than what we've seen all along. Frankly, this week is just as bad. Gold's probably down close to $100 this week for absolutely no reason. They just keep attacking and attacking and attacking. And the 12th and 15th was, in my mind, kind of suicidal, because it kind of awoke the physical demand beast. We had our best month ever in April by 40% because of massive buying, and we had the second major shortage of silver this year. And if the prices keep going down more, we'll have another resurgence of silver, and they'll have to shut down the mints, and the premiums will surge again. And again, by taking the mining stocks down this much, they're pretty much bankrupting the industry. I was just talking to a good friend of mine who's in the business, and he's talking about how Toronto and Vancouver, aside from what happened to their hockey teams, are absolutely decimated. These are major cities in Canada, and it's a big part of their business. And of course, the mining companies themselves are dead. They don't even have the personnel because of what the cartel has done for the past 20 years. They don't even have the personnel if they had the capital, and now they have absolutely no capital. So, in a scarce industry where there's not enough metal to start with, and the Chinese and the Indians and the Russians and the Arabs are buying hand over fist, we're going to see a shocking paralysis of supply, and probably a significant decline in the coming years, just as the reasons to buy it for central banks and retail buyers alike are going to explode.
Yeah, and it's so easy for all of this stuff to go down the memory hole because it all happens so quickly. Now, for anybody who forgot, in late March, ABN AMRO defaulted on physical allocated gold deliveries for its customers. A huge Dutch bank, I think one of the largest banks in the Eurozone, just said, we're going to settle in cash. You don't get your gold, even though it was allocated, even though it was in your name. It doesn't exist. You don't get it. And what kills me about it is that people forget about that. So when you and when others talk about the demand for physical soaring and a shortage being created, people forget about ABN AMRO defaulting on its customers.
Yeah, well, it's no different than you asking me about the IRS. I forget about it because there's so many of these things going on at once. ABN AMRO is a major issue. They're the largest, I believe, the largest bank in Holland, and they pretty much said, we're defaulting. But then again, that's nothing compared to the Fed telling Germany that it's going to take 7 years to give them an amount of gold that should take them 7 weeks to do it. Again, when the cartel is attacking that paper price, all you're going to see in the mainstream media, which is A, dumbed down, and B, compromised, is things that the powers that be want them to say. The head story on Yahoo Finance today is Jim Rogers says gold was due for a correction. Jim Rogers is the ultimate mainstream portfolio manager who cares about nothing except making money, and frankly, I don't even think he understands gold. But this is the kind of stuff you're going to see, and the only way that the media is going to say anything positive about gold and silver is if the prices are soaring, because then they'll be forced to acknowledge it, and that's why the cartel will not let that happen. But of course, as we said, they can't control the dynamics of the physical market, and that's why I cannot scream louder and have for many years about only owning the real thing. Because if you own anything in that paper realm, they will destroy it. Not they might destroy it, they will destroy it. I believe half of all the miners will be gone within the next 6 to 12 months. And 2 years from now, if the prices haven't changed much, I'll bet you there'll be about 10% left of all the mining companies in the entire world at these prices.
Yeah, and the Kennecott mine, is gone. And what is that, 18% of domestic silver production? You're right. The supply is just going to dry up.
Yeah, and the Pascagoula project was the largest gold project that was expected to come online, and now that's gone along with Kennecott. And by the way, if anyone thinks Kennecott's coming on anytime soon, they're insane because, first of all, the cleanup alone will probably take a year or two, billions of tons of dirt, and of course, that's like a seismic zone, and the environmental issues, that could take decades before that thing ever gets going again. And I believe it is around 15% of the silver in the country and 7% of the gold, and 23% of the copper.
Yeah, and let's circle back real quickly to the Jim Rogers thing, because I've always wondered that, and he is sort of elevated in our world because he does talk about precious metals a lot. He does speak a lot of honesty. He wants the Fed disbanded. One of my issues, though, and questions has always been, if I ever had a chance to interview him, Andy, would be to ask him, how does he reconcile his past, having been a partner in the Quantum Fund with George Soros, who is an avowed globalist and an enemy of the Constitution and sovereign states all over this planet?
Yeah, I don't know what's more dangerous regarding who you listen to, whether it's the actual Goldman Sachs or listen to these mainstream portfolio managers who pretend that they care. And Mark Faber, by the way, is no different. Both Mark Faber and Jim Rogers, as much as they understand about the world, have been bearish about gold for the past 12 years. I've watched them for years and years poo-poo it, just talk about other commodities. Then when they had big surges, they started to talk about it, and then as soon as it goes down, like everyone else, they start to attack it more viciously than anyone to overcompensate. And, and of course you brought up an association with George Soros, another kind of almost mythological figure who's kind of used as some kind of media plant to try to, get the propaganda across about how gold should be sold. Heck, even when that guy is buying gold, they somehow spin it as if he's selling it.
Yeah, and, Soros is sort of mythologically evil within our camp, and he should be. He truly is an evil man, in my opinion. I think he's pretty much a direct report to the Rothschilds. But Jim Rogers, on the other hand, is sort of a mythological good guy in our community to the degree that I post his material. So many others do. I do like a lot of what he says. But here, he and Soros were buddies going back years and years, going back decades. Well, Andy, let me circle back to that G7 emergency meeting. It's not necessary that you'd have any information for us on that, but what are your thoughts? I mean, is the system absolutely collapsing to the degree that an emergency meeting is necessary?
Frankly, I thought that meeting was last week. They have so many emergency meetings. Since 2008, it seems like every weekend has been an emergency meeting. That's why I wrote a piece a few years back called Sunday Night Special, because of so many times, like with Cyprus, where these crazy announcements had to be made to save the world on Sunday nights after working the entire weekend with a bunch of unelected bureaucrats in five-star hotels, putting other people's lives in their own hands. I mean, look, they're going to sit there and they're going to talk about all these horrible issues, and then they're going to come out with a statement saying all's well. We're not worried about currency manipulation. Everyone is on the same page, and we're not worried about the economies. Everything is getting better. But, behind the scenes, they're doing evil things that are destroying our lives. And no matter what they do with the Dow Jones propaganda average, it's not going to make the U.S. economy get better. It may promote a couple of bubbles in speculative real estate and stocks for the few people that are left that own stocks, given that the earnings are so bad that the PE ratios are now at 2,000, bubble-like levels. But it's not going to change Main Street, and certainly none of that free-fed money is going to anyone except those banks. And, now those banks are, for the most part, their partners, so it's really just giving the money to themselves.
Well, yeah, and at the end of the day, Andy, I think everybody's waking up to the fact that the banksters are the problem. The IRS is the problem. The Federal Reserve, the central banks, the IMF, the BIS, the World Bank is the problem. It literally is gutting the heart right out of humanity, and it wants to take the food off your dinner table. It wants to take your home out from under you. It wants to remove everything that's good and decent because these banksters literally have no soul. Some might argue that they worship Satan himself.
Well, look, it's no different than it's ever been throughout history. You can go to any civilization back to the Romans and the Greeks and Europe from the 1300s, and it's always been the politicians and the bankers. The difference is that today, instead of 500 million people in the world, there's 7 billion people in the world, and because of modern communication technology and computer algorithms and the printing presses, they have much more sophisticated techniques for controlling the masses and maintaining the status quo. Of course, the system they make has become so top-heavy with these criminals on top and so decimated at the bottom, and so and of course the fuel is this paper money and the debt that it generates, that of course the system becomes top heavy and collapses on itself, and will probably do so more spectacularly than ever in history. But the how and when is the big question. I mean, could they possibly make this last for 3 years, where they have an all's well for the bankers while Main Street crumbles, and yet something doesn't hit the fan? I highly doubt it. It certainly can't be that much longer, though, because look, we're at $17 trillion of debt today. No matter what we do, we're going to be at $20-25 trillion debt 2 or 3 years from now, and all those other debt numbers like the unfunded balance sheet liabilities, etc. And of course, what's going on in Europe. And hey, 2 years from now, the Japanese money supply will be double what it is today. I mean, people will be destitute in Japan because of inflation. So, can they make things last that long? I would be pretty shocked to see it. But, that's why I only hold physical gold and silver and nothing else, because I know that whether it takes 2 months, 2 years, or 4 years, that it's going to survive and protect me.
Before we let you go, I just want to talk about the alternative media. I mean, you're a part of it. I'm a part of it. I'm so proud to know guys like you and be able to report this kind of information, because as the old school gatekeeping mockingbird media crumbles, right? Newsweek magazine goes out of business. CNN viewership is pretty much at an all-time low. This overtly criminal system under which we live is now apparent to all. And the only place that you can really find the real information on it is in the alternative media, because I want to cite this as a perfect example of the mockingbirds and what they do, which I don't think is effective anymore. David Ignatius wrote an article that appeared in the Washington Post recently, an establishment mockingbird publication, and Ignatius writes, quote, "The crippling problem in Washington these days isn't any organized conspiracy against conservatives, journalists, or anyone else. Rather, it's a federal establishment that's increasingly paralyzed because of poor management and political second-guessing. What should frighten the public is not the federal government's monstrous power, but its impotence." Can you imagine anything more overtly ridiculous than for Ignatius to write something like that, when what we see is unconstitutional criminality before us across every level?
Well, there are a lot of sociopaths out there, and you said about how bankers and politicians, do they worship Satan? It comes down to nature versus nurture, and the fact is, when people are put into positions of such power and wealth over time, throughout history, it's always the same. They do lose their sense of conscientiousness, and they do in some ways become sociopaths. And that's why no matter what you say, or what you do, or what you see in the real world, you're going to see the mainstream media and the leaders of the world not just pretend that things are okay as is, but to actually believe it. And thank God for the internet, because it's the only way that we're going to end this, because the alternative media is becoming an extremely powerful and strong force in the world. In fact, I saw an article the other day saying, is the mainstream media actually crumbling because of it? And I believe firmly 100% that in time that no one's going to be reading these mainstream rags, because they want real information. And the worse things get, the more people are going to seek the truth, which you can only find on the internet.
That's right. And before I let you go, I absolutely have to get your opinion on where we are with the price of silver, with the price of gold. I saw an interview on Kitco News in which Peter Grandich basically said every sign of a bottom, including pain and anguish, is here. And I think he said, I'm paraphrasing, he's lost more money in the last 18 months than most people will ever save in a lifetime. So the sentiment appears to be very, very, very desperate, and maybe that's the sign of a bottom.
Right. Well, of course, when anyone's talking about losing money, he's talking about mining stocks and ETFs and paper PM investments, which I cannot scream louder and have done so for years to avoid. The cartel will destroy them. And again, it doesn't matter what the price is. The mining industry has been systematically destroyed. I just said, I talked to someone who's in the financing business. Financing for mining companies is dead. It's not just dead, it's beyond dead. And I don't believe it's coming back anytime soon. In fact, it may never come back, because frankly, when the cartel is finally broken, and I've said this for so long, that's going to be when it's hitting the fan. And at that point, that's going to be when the regulation and the windfall taxes and the nationalizations start to come into play. So if he's talking about losing money, he's talking about paper PM investments. And frankly, whether the price of gold ends this year at $2,000 or it ends the year at $1,000, there's a very good chance that those losses aren't coming back. As for what's going to happen in the near term, if you're talking about silver you were mentioning before, look, we are way below the cost of production right now, and I'm talking about probably around $30 an ounce is the marginal cost. Miners are decimated. They're losing money. Heck, even Barrick Gold has a good chance, I believe. In fact, I think a very, very good chance of going bankrupt in the next couple of years because of what's going on at Pascua-Lama alone. So if there's no production going on because we're below the cost of production and the miners have no money, you're going to have a major, major supply issue. And therefore, for the price to be taken much lower, the paper price here, it's almost incredulous to me because it doesn't seem physically possible to happen. But that said, that's why you own the physical price, the physical product, not the paper. And the lower that they hit the paper, the more the premiums are going to surge for the physical. So again, I can't predict the bottom because this is the craziest attack I've ever seen. Worse than 2011 and worse than 2008. But it's not because the fundamentals are worse. It's frankly because the fundamentals are better than they've ever been, and someone or some group does not want people to run into them.
Well, Andy, I guess that sums it up about as well as we can sum it up. I just think that the outrage, if it's not palpable now, it never will be. And if we can't take the country back in the face of all this criminality, then we never will. I guess that's where we're at, and we can hope and pray for better days ahead. But the fact of the matter is, as long as this criminal cabal remains in control, there appear to be dark days ahead.
Yeah, I'm not a believer that the people are going to be able to turn this around. The financial situation, the economic situation, is too great to overcome, and and the fact that the government has tried to put off reality forever with all this money printing has only made the situation worse. We must go through a cleansing, and it's probably going to be horribly painful, and it doesn't matter if people revolt. If they revolt, it'll just make it come quicker. The point is you need to think about protecting yourself from what's coming and not just buying physical gold and silver, but thinking about the worst-case scenario. Because given what I see in the world and have been seeing consistently for the past decade, it is coming. It's just a matter of when.
Okay, guys, and I'm going to make a personal pitch here for Andy and his crew over at Miles Franklin because, in the history of SGT Report, APMEX has never done anything for SGT Report. Gainesville Coin's never done anything for us. Nobody's ever stepped up to the plate to support this kind of content and this kind of information that you can get every day at SGT Report, but our friends at Miles Franklin have, and I'm very grateful for that. So, Andy, if people need a personal touch, which a lot of folks do, right, because they have IRAs or 401ks or money tied up or they don't know what to buy, or if they go to the wrong place, they're going to be sold numismatics. Can you tell them how to get in touch with the honest, decent guys over at Miles Franklin?
Sure. It's milesfranklin.com. Our number is 800-822-8080. And if you have questions personally, email me at ahoffman@milesfranklin.com.
Yeah, and just to be clear, your markup over spot on Silver Eagles and Maples and Silver Rounds is extremely competitive with any of those others I just mentioned, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, we compete with anybody on price. Look, it's a commodity business. Actually selling gold and silver, what differentiates in this business is the level of service, the honesty, and of course, in our case, the education that we give for free. So if you want to, as the world gets more difficult in this unregulated business, you're going to have to be even more careful who you buy from or sell to. So just give us a call and we'll answer all your questions.
And guys, 3 of the best pieces of information that come out every single day on the precious metals markets are written by David Schechtman, by Bill Holter, and by Andy Hoffman. And you can see all of those on their blogs over at Miles Franklin, or you can catch them at SGT Report because we post them every single day. Andy, once again, thanks so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
You're very welcome, and thank you, Sean. We'll talk soon.
All right, brother. See you. Bye.